Hey guys, this is Raziar on the Half-Life 2.net forums. I'm going to be playing Europa Universalis 3 here with the Napoleon's Ambition in Nominate and Heir to the Throne expansions. Some people might call this a Let's Play, but I'd rather not do that since the purpose of this video is to basically play the game, but not play it to have any sort of goals. Instead, I'm going to be playing it and explain some of the game concepts as I understand them. I'm not the best player at this game, but I'm hoping with this video I'll be able to help out one or two of my friends who are interested in the game, but otherwise think the learning curve is too steep. So, the country I'm going to start with here is an eastern one, an Indian country as a matter of fact. I'm not going to go ahead and do any of the western nations because, well, I haven't really played those very much, and I do not understand how the papal controller and the papal elections work, nor do I understand the game mechanics of the Holy Roman Empire. So I'm going to do something with a country that I'm fairly familiar with. I've never played this country, Vijayanagar, but I'm going to give it a shot. I have pretty much for all my PlayStation played in the Southeast Asian area here. I don't know why. I guess I kind of like the challenge, even though I'm not very good at the game. So I have my country here selected, Vijayanagar. Moderate difficulty over here, as you see. Hindu country. And, well, let's give it a shot. Okay, I'm in the game, and it starts out as paused by default. Now, before I actually like to press play, I basically take stock in my empire and see what's going on with it. Let me change to political mode here. See all my neighbors. And the first thing I like to do is come up to the top left here and change some of my settings. Nothing that I really do here in the start page other than see what my starting political conditions are, because I have two vassals here, Mysore and Travancore, right here and here. Vassals are basically countries that, well, you're basically kind of like a parent country, and they are being protected by you. And I believe their taxes, half of their taxes go to you, so that's kind of good, but they may, if they feel you to be weak or you're engaged in too many wars, might possibly engage war on you and break their vassalship. So even though they're my vassals, I still have to keep an eye on them. I have a Reconquest Casus Belli on Mysore and Travancore, so they're my vassals, but if I want, I can kind of annex them into my empire, and I have a Casus Belli on that, which means I will not have any negative stability drop if I decide to take them back into my empire. And of course a religious liberation Casus Belli on Deccan. Deccan's right here, my northern neighbor, fairly large, and the reason I have the religious liberation Casus Belli. Now it shows that all these, oh okay, I see. All their countries here, as you can see, are Hindu, but their state religion is Sunni. They are an Islam nation. And so that's why I have my Casus Belli on them, because I guess their religion, Islam, is occupying these Hindu states here. Okay, going back into my page here, I'm going to click over on this tab, and I'm going to see what sort of advisors I have to start with. Some nations you may start with no advisors. Some you might have some advisors that you can pick, and you have them for about a year before anybody else can buy them. If I click on here, I can see that I have all these guys here. It sorts them in order of rank, anywhere from 1 star to 6 stars. I don't have any 6 stars, but if I did, they would still be here. I'm going to see if any of these are any useful for me. Of any use, rather. Now, I'm not really liking any of these, and because I don't have to take them, because I'm not going to take them, I'm going to have a slightly better financial situation because I don't have to pay the price to buy them, and I don't have the monthly upkeep, which for a starting nation, especially a small one, can be fairly rough if you're not careful, especially if you get a lot of advisors that are of high rank. So I'm not going to take any advisors right now. I'm going to go on to the next tab, and this is a very, very important tab here. This is where you research your technologies and where you manage your treasury, which controls inflation, but I'll talk about that in a little bit. The most important thing on this page is basically to see your economic reading here, what your taxes are, what your expenses are, basically what your income is and what your expenses are, and researching technology. Now, there's the different nations in the game, whether they be like Christian nations, Western nations, or in Chinese nations, Indian nations, or like New World nations, whatever they belong to certain technology groups. Like as you can see right here, I am in the Indian technology group. This makes my research efficiency at only half capacity. If I were a Christian nation like in Western Europe, I would have a research efficiency of 100%. And if I were like a New World nation, I would have a research efficiency of only 10%. This has a big effect on the game and being able to research your technologies here. Basically makes them more expensive. You require more money to get to each level. So the Western nations, the ones with a higher research efficiency, will be able to have a much better chance of researching later technologies than these less advanced nations. So what I usually like to do at the start, right now I'm going to keep these relatively equal, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on my treasury one here. What this will do will lock it, and when you lock it, basically it will not automatically be adjusted by the game. Like if you can see here, if I drag the stability bar, all these other sliders, they move on their own. But if I lock a couple of these sliders and I move it, only the ones that are unlocked will move. This could be really useful and something I learned fairly late in my playing, because I would always be dragging my technology sliders here and lower stuff that I didn't want to lower while I was increasing the stuff that I wanted to increase, and it was kind of frustrating. So if you have something at a relative percentage you want to keep, like this is roughly 25% of full, you can lock it and everything else that isn't locked will be affected instead. But I'm going to try to keep these relatively equal. It's not really that big of a deal right now for me, but the treasury one I'm going to keep locked. The reason for this, as you can see, is that this affects inflation. Inflation is quite bad for a nation, especially as it gets high. The thing with Europa Universalis III is that you have two forms of income. You have a monthly income and you have a yearly income. If you look up here at the top where it says 71, that's my number of ducats, which is the money in the game. You can see I am currently at negative 1.79 per month and 48.06 at the end of the year. This means for every month in the game, there's 12 months in a year, I will lose 1.79 ducats per month. But at the end of the year, on January 1st, I will gain 48 ducats. This means I'm at a monthly decrease, which you will almost never be at a monthly increase unless your treasury is up. But I'll talk about that a little more. Bit more. So this means I will be losing money per month, but at the end of the year, I'll get a large lump sum from my census taxes, and that will leave me with a net gain of 26.58. This means if I keep my expenses relatively tame and kind of how they are, every year I will be gaining a little bit of money, or quite a bit of money actually, compared to some smaller nations. And the thing you want to realize is, or the way you want to play the game, which I didn't do when I first started playing because I was naive, is that you want to be dependent on the year-end taxes to manage your country you do not want to focus on the monthly income. It's not a bad thing if you have a negative monthly income, as long as you have a positive annual income. Now, it's going to be a little bit difficult if your annual income is not very much and you don't really have enough to do stuff. But the one thing that newbie players do, and that I used to do, is they would take this treasury slider and they'd crank it all the way up at the expense of their technology. And this, you see on the left here, their monthly income is now 7, but their monthly expenses is only 1.8. This means that, well, you can't see it updated yet, but this means that they will get, for every month, they will have a increased expense, or they will have a profit of about 5.2 every month. Now, they will think that they're gaining money and they're basically have more to spend for the nation, buy units, etc. But as you can see here on the treasury slider, the inflation is being changed to 0.99 each year with this budget. Now, I did not know this when I was first playing, and I really wish I had. The inflation here, as you can see right now, is 0.0, but if this is increasing by 1 every year, this means by like a period of 10 years, you will have an inflation of 10, which is incredibly bad, because for every little bit of inflation you have, everything that you do is going to be that much more expensive. And if you start getting to 10% and then especially 20% and beyond, your nation is going to be severely crippled and you're going to be basically hurting monetarily, and it might bring your empire crashing down quite easily. It's very hard to recover from a high inflation because it takes a long time to reduce inflation, much longer than it takes to increase the inflation if you have the treasury slider all the way to the right like this. So what I'm going to do is keep this right now at 0, and I'm going to freeze it. That's because I do not want my inflation to increase at all. Sometime in the future I might need to increase my inflation, mint new coins, but right now I'm not needing that. So I'm going to keep my technologies roughly the same here, and I'm going to go on to the next tab. Well, this tab is not usually that important for me at the start, but it has a very important it's a very important area for me when I'm playing the game later and I need to manage the maintenance of my military units, whether they land or naval, the amount of expenses that I'm using to maintain them. As you can see, this slider here, you can basically spend all the money that it requires to maintain them, or you can slide it down to half, or basically almost 0% maintenance, which decreases the morale of the armies, but it saves you a lot of money. If you're not in wartime, or if you feel that you're not going to be threatened by any of your neighbors for quite a while, you can lower this down to about half, and the result is that you will save a lot of money that would otherwise be spent in maintaining your troops, and instead that technology can be going towards your research. The downside of this is that for every month that goes, the morale of your armies or your navies will decrease. And if they're decreased all the way, which is what will kind of happen if you go, like a couple months or a couple years with this, if you get into combat with an enemy or rebel units or something, and this is still like this, you will probably lose that battle because your people will be completely demoralized because they're not receiving the maintenance that they need. So if you know or you suspect that you might be getting into combat at any time soon, I would be advised to crank this back all the way up to full, and it requires a couple months to be able to get your morale back up to full force. Now up here is something that you can do to change your unit technology, kind of the default unit that you use to build. Like if I click this, instead of Indian, well, I guess I can only do Indian foot soldier, but like this archer thing, instead of Indian archers, which has their certain stats, I can, if I want, change to hill fighter cavalry instead. This will convert all my units to hill fighter cavalry, and when I research or when I train new units, they will be hill fighter cavalry. The reason you'd want to do this or not do this is just based on the stats, whether you're going to be kind of offensive or defensive. It's all up to you. You can kind of play around with that. I don't usually change it too much because what I start with is usually satisfactory for me. Okay, on this next tab, this is the religion tab. You can see that I'm Hindu here, and there's not really a whole lot that I'm going to change on this tab. You have some religious decisions that you can do that will change certain parts, have certain effects on your nation. And if you had any rebel factions, of course, it would explain them here, but I'm not going to go through that. Oh, one thing on the religion tab is my tolerance. Yeah, of the Hindu faith, I'm tolerant of them quite a bit because, of course, my nation is Hindu. But then I have the heretical beliefs, which basically has no modifier for them, other than, well, a negative base value. But because my legitimacy is up and I'm Hindu, it increases it to by 2, so it basically balances out. And the heretical beliefs for the Hindu are the Buddhist, the Confucian, and the Shinto. The heretical beliefs of a religious group are basically religions that are kind of like in the same region, I guess, but they're not quite the same religion, because the Buddhist, Confucian, Shinto, and Hindu they're roughly in the same area of the world, Southeast Asia, East Asia here. So they're kind of close, and they have lots of relations with each other as nations. So they're not as unfriendly as they might be with other nations, as you can see here with heathen. Heathen beliefs for the Hindu are the Catholic, Orthodox, Sunni, Shiite, Animist, and Shamanist. These are basically the far extremes away from the religion that is currently your state religion. Whereas I guess the Buddhist, Confucian, Shinto, and Hindu have some similarities as religions. These ones have nothing similar at all. And so there's a negative modifier, and my relations with nations that are of either any of these religions, it will decrease my diplomacy with them and their standing with me. But other than that, I'm not going to be going over anything else on this page right now. On this next tab is another important tab. This is the, well, I don't know what the tab is called, but this is where you can change your government type, which I can't change right now, and you can add national ideas to your nation, which I also cannot do right now because I need a government technology of level 4. The most important thing right now in this area are these little sliders down at the bottom here. This is where you basically pick where your nation is headed, what the ideals of your nation are going to be. For example, whether you want to be a centralized nation with high centralization or decentralized. They have their own benefits and negatives. As you can see, decentralization is fairly negative. The only benefit really is war exhaustion, and everything else is negative. So a decentralized nation is a fairly primitive nation, and I would recommend getting that up higher if you can. The only problem with this first slider here is that this is one of the most destructive sliders. As you can see at the bottom there where it says 33.3%, the possible effects of changing this slider up like this is your country's destabilized, you might have a large revolt, or you might have a local pretender rise. These can be really, really troublesome, except the country destabilized, which is the ideal one to get, but it's not usually going to happen, especially since it's only 33.3%, whereas the other two combine to 66%. Now, if you go the other way, you have, I mean, the effects are less severe, but of course, decentralized nations have a lot more penalties other than the war exhaustion. So I would recommend when you're starting out, especially if you're a small nation, do not change this one at all, because if you have a large revolt or if a pretender rises, your nation is going to be severely adversely affected, and it might be fairly hard to recover from it. It's not going to end your game, possibly, but especially if a pretender rises and he takes the throne, it's going to decrease your legitimacy and basically cause hell for you in the rest of the world when dealing with other nations. And of course you have these other sliders, which I'm not really going to go into, but you can basically, if you hover in the center here, where the slider's not at, well, I guess where it's at too, you can see what your current effects are. If you hover on the left side, you can see what the effects would be for it all the way to the left, if you were all the way to the left. And if you go to the right, you can basically see what it would be if you're all the way to the right. Like if you're all the way at free trade versus all the way at mercantilism. So right now, I'm gonna think for a second and figure out what I want to take for my nation. Well, I think what I want to do right now to start with is make my nation a little bit more innovative. And so I'm gonna take my slider here and click it to the left. And when I do this, I'm going to get a little event popped up. It's a basically 1/3 chance of either any of these happening, and we'll see what we get. Dangerous ideas are spreading. Well, this, as you can read here, it's just a little description of it, but if you hover over this, the buttons down here, this basically lets you know that's what's happening to your nation as a result of sliding that slider like that. And I lose 1 stability. And there's my stability drop. Let me cover stability real quick. Stability is a measure of, well, I guess you can say it's a measure of stability in your country. It affects things such as taxes, morale in your nations. I'm not completely sure of all the effects, but it's recommended that you keep your stability above 0 and ideally at a level of 3. Level of 3 is the maximum it can be, and your stability is one of the fastest researching technologies, but only because it can go to a level of 3. So because my stability drops and because my slider is currently pumping in 0.7 ducats every month, it's going to take until March 1401 for my stability to rise from 0 to 1. And I want that to happen a little bit quicker because I want to have a stable country. So I'm going to pop my slider up a little bit, quite a bit actually, to about 6.0, and this will now increase it once I hit September of 1400. This might adjust, a little bit, might take a little bit longer, a little bit less, depending on, well, I'm not really sure what, but it takes a little bit of time. Sometimes I have this and I can see when it's going to finish, but when I get to that month, it's the next month. Then when I get to that next month, it turns out it's going to take until the next month. It's kind of frustrating, but right now I'm going to keep it at 6.0 and try to get my stability up to 3. Because once my stability is up to 3, no funding will be in stability, and it'll all go back into technology. And because my tech group is fairly low, I'm not even going to bother. I'm not too worried, rather, about keeping these up and researching these because they'll take a long time anyway. And by long time, I mean it's going to take potentially dozens of years or hundreds of years. As you can see, the government at 0.1, that's going to take over 100 years right now. And as I increase my slider thing, or if I gain more taxes to be able to increase my technology, this will drop down. But because of my tech group and because of my funds currently in it, this is going to take a long time anyway, so I'm not too concerned at this point in the game. Okay, on this tab, this is the recruitment tab, I guess, where you can recruit generals, recruit admirals, or if you want, you can convert your ruler into a general, which I would not recommend because, as it says, any monarch who leads an army is far more likely to die, and of course your death can negatively affect your country. So if you have an army, like I have an army right here, it has no leader. If you want a leader for that army, which will basically affect its morale and its ability to fight well, you would recruit a general, like you see here, except recruiting this general for me right now is going to cost me 43 ducats, which is more than half of what I have up here, and I don't want to do that right now. I can just have my guys fight without a general for now. On this next tab here, this is where you have the traditions, cultural tradition, navy tradition, army tradition. basically what this lets you do is if you hover over these guys, you can see that you'll lose a certain percentage of tradition and you'll gain one of these great men. So basically, if you don't have any great men that you like available in this pool here, you can instead come here and recruit a great man from here and get the exact one that you want. However, if you're, see, my cultural tradition is at 20%. If I pick one of these guys that takes 20% like this, it'll most likely drop my cultural tradition down to 0, and I'll get this type of great man, but he'll be at a low level, maybe just a 2 or level 3, if not a level 1. Now what happens if you want to get a better one is you need to increase your cultural tradition, which right now only increases at a rate of 0.5%, or rather 0.5, so 50%, 0.50% rather, every year, and that's a long time. What you can do is you can go research one of these cultural decisions, or rather enact one of these cultural decisions, which will they have certain effects. Like if I had a couple magistrates up here, I may want to commission a painting. Oh wait, not a painting. Okay, I may want to, commission a tapestry here, which will cost me some ducats and 1 magistrate. But the effects I'll get for about 19 years is that my national revolt risk will go down, my yearly legitimacy will go up, but my yearly cultural tradition will go up by 2 every year. So every year that passes, this will increase by 2% instead of, or in addition, 2% in addition to the 0.5, so it'll increase by 2.50% every year instead of the 0.50%, which is quite a significant increase. What I like to do with this is get this up to 100% or close to 100% before I build any of these guys, which will give me a great man that's close, like a level 5 or level 6, which is very good. But oh hey, there's one of the people that I'm making this video for. That will make them at a higher level here. So I get my cultural tradition up to a high level before I research this, and that's basically it for this. This is a great way to get the exact great man that you want. And on this final tab here that I usually like to check, although it's not really important at the start of the game, is your current mission and of course some national decisions, but it's not really that much of a concern right now. Where the mission is, as I play, like within the first month or 2, I'll get a mission and it'll tell me what it is, and then I can come back to this page here to reference it and see what I have to do to be able to complete that mission and get the effects for doing so. Okay, so at the start, basically, I like to hire a great man or a couple if I have some good ones that I want. I adjust my technology sliders. Usually I start by freezing my treasury. Sometimes, if I don't think I'm going to be in a war for a while, I'll kind of drop my my land maintenance down to about half, or my navy down to about half. That'll give me some money that I can spend more into technology instead of just maintaining my troops. But I expect to be in a war with the Deccan here, possibly, or Orissa, so, or maybe even my vassal. So I'm going to keep that at full right now because I don't know what they're going to do to me, and I don't know when I'm going to wage war on them. The other thing that I like to do is I come in and make one of my policy changes here. And it's recommended when you can make this policy change that you do so, because after doing so, it takes about 10 years before you can make your next one. And if you hold off 5 years before you make one, it will take 10 years from that point you change it. So if you want to get your nation into a better, more ideal place that you want to be as far as your policies, I recommend you do that as soon as you can do it and deal with the consequences of doing so. So I changed that, and that's basically about it for start.